Welcome and hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Scott. I am the Policy Director of Global Liver Institute. For those of you that don't know us, GLI is a global, nonprofit patient advocacy organization focused on improving the lives of individuals and families impacted by liver disease through promoting innovation, encouraging collaboration, and scaling optimal approaches to help eradicate liver diseases. I am proud to be here today to open this educational briefing on the current state of liver cancer. This has been an incredible month of recognition of liver disease, liver health, and liver cancer as we celebrated the hashtag October is for Livers education and awareness campaign as part of the larger Liver Cancer Awareness Month. However, our work is not done. With the incidence of liver cancer in the United States nearly tripling, and with death rates having more than doubled since 1980, we must work collectively to prevent and address this deadly condition. Today, you will hear from patient and clinician experts on the rising challenges and opportunities surrounding liver cancer with the goal of improving health equity for all patients going through their own liver cancer journey. Through collaboration with our peers in patient advocacy, like the Hepatitis B Foundation, the Taiwan Hepatitis Information and Care Association, NASH Knowledge, leaders in Congress, and experts in liver cancer clinical practice, we can finally put an end to this deadly condition. To start, I am especially honored today to share a special message from the leader on liver cancer policy in the U.S. House of Representatives, Representative Nydia Velázquez of New York. Congresswoman Velázquez is currently serving as representative for New York's 7th Congressional District. In the 117th Congress, she is the chairwoman of the House Small Business Committee, a senior member of the Financial Services Committee, and a member of the House Committee on Natural Resources. She has made history several times during her tenure in Congress. In 1992, she was the first Puerto Rican woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In February 1998, she was named the ranking Democratic member of the House Small Business Committee, making her the first Hispanic woman to serve as ranking member of the full House Committee. Most recently, in 2006, she was named chairwoman of the House Small Business Committee, making her the first Latina to chair a full congressional committee. Championing economic opportunities for the poor, affordable housing, improved healthcare, and civil rights protections for minorities, women, and immigrants have been a hallmark of her tenure on Capitol Hill. But most importantly for us here today, she has been a true champion of liver health in Congress. Through her leadership, paired with the leadership of our champion in the Senate, Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, and the reintroduction of both the bipartisan bicameral Liver Act and by Congresswoman Velázquez simultaneously introducing the Recognizing October 2021 as the Liver Cancer Awareness Month resolution in the House, we can move the field forward and shift the conversation to shine a spotlight on liver cancer. On behalf of all New Yorkers and Americans impacted by liver cancer, we could not be more appreciative of her continued leadership in liver health. Thank you. After Congresswoman Velázquez, we will hear from Dr. Myron Schwartz. He's the director of the Mount Sinai Liver Cancer Program. He's an international authority on hepatic resection and transplantation for liver cancer. Dr. Schwartz has been with Mount Sinai Health System for more than 3 decades. After graduating from Jefferson Medical College and several years as a general practitioner for the National Health Service Corps in rural Virginia, Dr. Schwartz came to Mount Sinai in 1982 to complete residencies in general and vascular surgery. He worked with Dr. Charles Miller to establish the Mount Sinai Liver Transplant Program in 1988, and since then he has devoted his career to hepatobiliary surgery and transplantation. Over the years, he has served as director of pediatric and adult liver transplantation and is currently the clinical director of the Mount Sinai Liver Cancer Program. Today, with research director Dr. Lovett, Dr. Schwartz has led the collaborative effort that has put Mount Sinai at the worldwide forefront of liver cancer clinical care and clinical translational research. He has published more than 300 papers in peer-reviewed journals and has written 21 book chapters. Dr. Schwartz lectures frequently both in the U.S. and abroad, and we could not be more appreciative of his time here today. After Dr. Schwartz, you will hear from Tony Villiotti. He is the president of Nash Knowledge, a patient advocacy organization focused on education and awareness efforts for non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH. He is also formerly a GLI Advanced Advocacy Academy patient advocate graduate. He is a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and a graduate of Penn State University. He is a CPA and spent his business career in a variety of senior accounting and financial management positions. Tony has also served as the board of directors for 2 publicly traded companies. After retiring in 2003, Tony was diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. His disease progressed to NASH, or non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, cirrhosis, and eventually liver cancer, followed by a life-saving liver transplant in March of 2018. His experience with liver disease motivated him to form Nash Knowledge, a nonprofit corporation with the mission of increasing public awareness of non-alcoholic liver disease. Through Nash Knowledge, Tony has developed educational materials he wishes he had when he was first diagnosed, and also produced a documentary intended to be a cautionary tale for those at risk or newly diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Finally, you will hear from Jacki Chen, who leads the organization THICA and is a part of the Hepatitis B Foundation. Jacki Chen is a chronic hepatitis B patient who was diagnosed in the early 1990s during a requested blood work to check for hepatitis B infection in the United States. Dr. Chen is a molecular biologist with research experiences on gene expression and hormone signaling, and he is now a university professor with a focus on medical education on pharmacotherapies. Dr. Chen is also involved in advocacy work for global elimination of viral hepatitis since 2013, working with both the Hepatitis B Foundation and also by founding a patient-led non-profit organization in Taiwan to advance prevention and treatment of viral hepatitis. The Taiwan Hepatitis Information and Care Association, THICA, has led the way in Taiwan by providing the latest accurate information and treatment protocols for the people of Taiwan, and using what he has learned here in the United States. With that, I thank everyone so much for their time today and for their speaking on behalf of all impacted by liver cancer. I will now hand it over to Congresswoman Velasquez. Thank you.
Thank you to the Global Liver Institute for all the work that you do to address liver health, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about this important issue. Too many people in my district and around the country have lost someone due to liver cancer or are struggling themselves to fight this disease. In 2021, approximately 42,000 people in the United States will be diagnosed with primary liver cancer, and approximately 30,000 will die from this disease. Liver cancer is particularly prevalent among Asian Americans and Pacific Islander men and women, who are 2 times more likely to develop liver cancer as compared to the non-Hispanic white population. However, scientists have noted that taking preventative steps, such as increasing vaccinations and improving treatments, could significantly reduce the prevalence of liver cancer. That is why I reintroduced the Liver Illness Disability Education and Research Act, which will increase federal assistance to study, prevent, and treat liver cancer. My bill gives our local hospitals and community health centers federal funds to study liver cancer and offer better access to preventative and primary care services. I firmly believe that it is time for Congress to deploy federal resources across the country so that we can save lives and reduce the deadly effects of this disease. I firmly believe that it is time for Congress to deploy federal resources across the country so that we can save lives and reduce the deadly effects of this disease. Again, thank you to the Global Liver Institute for all the hard work that you do, and I look forward to our continuing partnership to advocate for those who have been affected by this disease. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Myron Schwartz, professor of surgery at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City and the director of our liver cancer program. And I plan to spend the next 15 minutes or so giving you an update on the status of liver cancer in the United States. Could we have the slides, please? When you look at liver cancer on a worldwide scale, it's an immense problem. Liver cancer is the third most common cause of cancer death in this world. Only lung cancer and colon cancer cause more death. It's not that liver cancer is so common as much as it is that most people who get it die from it. Next slide. The problem is more an Asian problem than it is anywhere else in the world, with China, Korea, Japan leading the way. And this is because for many years, hepatitis B infection, which is one of the important causes of liver cancer, has been endemic in those populations. And looking here, the United States is somewhere down the list, not looking so bad. Next slide. However, compared to most cancers in the United States, the incidence of which has been decreasing over recent years, this slide shows that between 1990 and 2009, liver cancer and bile duct cancer, which is closely associated, is in fact the most rapidly increasing type of cancer in its incidence in the United States over this time period. This is due to a few reasons, primarily the hepatitis C epidemic that has swept the country since the 1960s and 70s. Next slide. Liver cancer is one of the cancers. Another good example is lung cancer, where it's the result of long-standing irritation and inflammation that causes the liver to be repeatedly damaged, having to repair itself, damage and repair, ultimately leading to the buildup of scar tissue. That's what we call cirrhosis. And this takes a period of maybe 15 or 20 years of constant damage to the liver occurring. Once cirrhosis has been established, the process of damage and repair continues and starts to lead to mistakes in the replication of cells that can lead to the development of cancer, typically in 25 or 30 years after the initial insult began. The most common causes of this type of chronic liver disease that leads to liver cancer around the world are hepatitis B infection, hepatitis C infection, both of those are viruses, the use of alcohol, and fatty liver disease, the filling of the liver with fat that causes inflammation and causes reactions in the liver very similar to what alcohol does. Next. At Mount Sinai Hospital, as you can see in this slide, hepatitis C has been the most common underlying disease in patients who have liver cancer. And this is the case in the United States in general. Because New York is a city of immigrants and we have over 1 million Asian Asian inhabitants in New York City, and 20% of the Asian-born immigrants in New York City are infected with hepatitis B, we also see many people at our hospital with hepatitis B as the underlying disease. You can see that alcohol and NASH, which is steatohepatitis or fatty liver, overall in our experience haven't been as big factors as the hepatitis infections. Next. When we look at how common hepatitis B and C are, you can see that in the yellow bars, hepatitis B is very common throughout Asia and Africa. Hepatitis C is less common worldwide than hepatitis B, and North America is all the way at the far end of the curve. It doesn't look so bad. Next. But we have to look at the situation in a more granular way. This is a map of the upper part of Manhattan in New York City. And while it's true that in New York City, overall, the incidence of hepatitis infection is low, in Harlem, the incidence of hepatitis is as high as it is in any of the high incidence countries. This is related in large part to the socioeconomic situation and the high rate of use of intravenous drugs that can transmit this infection. Next. As a result, while liver cancer in general in the United States is only in the middle, as we saw before, the incidence in Central and East Harlem is at the same level as it is in China. So that this is a problem that is a major issue in many areas in the United States, in urban communities, in the communities along the coast with large immigrant populations. Next. The first step in dealing with the problem of liver cancer is to identify who is at risk, and then after that to look carefully at those people and find ways to find these tumors at an early stage. This has to be done on a ground level in the communities. At our hospital, we've established outreach programs extending into the communities throughout New York City, where there's a high incidence of hepatitis infection, in the African community, in the Asian community, in the Hispanic community, and established screening programs for hepatitis. And once patients are identified with hepatitis, then they're entered into the program to start looking for liver cancer. Next. Liver cancer can be prevented. Hepatitis B is transmitted through blood and body fluids, and this, in one of the great successes of public health over the past century, a vaccination was developed to prevent hepatitis B. This is now universally administered in the United States and, in fact, in China as well. And 100 years from now, there won't be a problem of liver cancer related to hepatitis B. But once hepatitis B infection is established, it's not something that can be cured by any currently known medication. And so that the key is to control it. We do have drugs that can do that and reduce the risk of cancer developing. Hepatitis C is also transmitted through infected blood, and there is no vaccine to prevent hepatitis C. But as of the year 2015, we now have very effective medicine that can reliably cure hepatitis C with a 3-month course of treatment with a medication taken by mouth. And clearing the hepatitis C reduces the likelihood of anything bad happening if the liver has not already progressed to cirrhosis. And even in those patients with cirrhosis, it stops the progression of cirrhosis and lowers the likelihood of a person developing cancer. Next. The liver is a very resilient organ, and this really is a good thing, but when it comes to liver cancer, it creates a problem because the liver is very adaptable, and if a cancer starts to grow in the liver, it can grow to a fairly substantial size and disable part of the liver, but the remaining liver can compensate and the liver function overall remains normal, and a person doesn't realize that there's anything wrong. And the symptoms only happen when the cancer begins to spread, at which point it's no longer possible to cure the disease. Now we know who is at risk for liver cancer. It's the people with chronic liver disease, with hepatitis or cirrhosis of any cause. And so that the key, once we identify these people, is to identify tumors at an early stage by screening people who have these risk factors and then continuing under surveillance to look periodically to look for signs of early liver cancer. Next. We do this by examining the liver every 6 months with some sort of imaging, either ultrasound or with MRI and CT scan. We also use blood tests, but the imaging is really the key. The blood tests are helpful, but they really are not a substitute for the imaging. And we have portable ultrasound machines that go into communities and do these examinations. It really has to reach out into the areas where the risk is high in order for it to be effective. And when found early, liver cancer is in fact quite curable. The graph that you see here shows the survival rates at 5 years of people with early liver cancer who are treated either with resection, which means removing the part of the liver that contains the tumor. We do that when the liver's function is still pretty good, or transplantation, removing the entire liver and replacing it in cases where the cirrhosis was already too advanced to allow for a safe removal of a part of the liver. Next. Now, I mentioned that there's a treatment for hepatitis C that was introduced in the year 2015, and this has actually resulted in a falling incidence of cancer related to hepatitis C. The bottom line that you see here with the blue dots is the incidence of cancer related to hepatitis C forecast into the future, and it's dropping. On the other hand, there's a rising problem that is looming ahead of us and is going to clearly take over as the primary issue related to liver cancer. And this is fatty liver disease, steatohepatitis, with projections that are very ominous for the coming years. Next slide. It's a pretty well understood fact that the United States has got a problem with obesity. This has been increasing over recent years. In this graph, you could see from 1990, when only a small proportion of the country had more than 10% of the people with obesity. By 2000, it was increasing, and by 2010, there are wide areas of the country with more than a quarter of the people obese, and areas primarily in the South where over 30% of the population is obese. Next. Obesity correlates with poverty. This is a map of New York City. On the left is the map of poverty. This is from the New York City Bureau of Statistics that publishes these data. And you can see that there are areas within New York City with the darker blue color, which are the areas where people are living below the poverty line. And corresponding in the graph on the right, the picture on the right, the black areas are the areas where obesity is the highest within the city. And if we would remember back to the graph I showed before, these are the same areas where liver cancer has a high incidence. Next slide. Our experience at Mount Sinai has changed. The graph on the left here is the same one that I showed before, showing the various liver diseases that people at Mount Sinai with liver cancer have come to us with. But the graph on the right is our experience over the past year. We saw 284 new patients in 2019, and you can see that the proportion of people with hepatitis C as the cause of their liver cancer is falling, whereas the proportion with fatty liver disease has doubled, and the incidence of alcohol-related liver disease is going up as well. These changes are quite dramatic, and they're happening across the country. Next. The problem with liver disease from fatty liver is very different from what we have when it comes to hepatitis. Hepatitis is a disease that affects the liver and not the rest of the body. But fatty liver disease is really only one manifestation of a problem. The underlying issue is the progressive obesity, diabetes that is overtaking our country, which leads to a whole constellation of problems. The fatty liver disease and liver cancer is just one. Heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, these are all common, all have a common origin in this condition we call the metabolic syndrome, which is the cause and effect of obesity in this country. And so that addressing the issue of liver cancer is going to take a broader approach to the overall health of the population with regard to controlling obesity, controlling the food that people eat, education, in order to turn this around. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Villiotti from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My experience with liver disease began in 2005. I was being treated by my doctor for diabetes. I was also overweight. In an appointment in 2005, he told me I had a fatty liver. I never heard of a fatty liver, and he said I should lose some weight, but didn't make a big deal of it. So I walked out of that appointment not really concerned about fatty liver, but continuing concerned about diabetes. So so I continued to see my doctor over the succeeding years on a periodic basis, and sometimes he mentioned fatty liver, sometimes he didn't, so I was very surprised. 9 years later, 2014, I walked into an appointment, and he said, "Well, I think your fatty liver has advanced to NASH, and I think you may even have cirrhosis." Well, that was kind of a shock to me. First, I didn't know what NASH was, non-alcoholic hepatitis. I discovered, and I never knew I was at risk for cirrhosis. I was pretty much a non-drinker, so I always considered liver disease to be a disease associated with alcohol abuse. So at that point, I was referred to a specialist, and I saw a hepatologist, and she confirmed the cirrhosis diagnosis. This was 2014, 9 years after my initial fatty liver diagnosis. And over the next couple of years, the condition seemed to be worse. I really wasn't experiencing any symptoms, so I felt fine, but I was told the disease was progressing. In 2017. At an appointment, the doctor told me I had cancer, liver cancer. Well, that was a jolt. Before that, the prospects of a transplant had been discussed, but never, I never really seriously considered it. But at that point, it became clear that my only alternative was to either get the transplant or I was going to die. So I went through all the testing to get on the transplant list, and the critical issue at that point was that if my cancer spread beyond the liver, I would not be eligible for a transplant. So the oncologist, had me on a program called stereotactic body radiation therapy, which consists of a very targeted radiation doses over a short period of time. Essentially, you had 5 treatments over a 10-day period. And the goal was to stop the spread of the tumor. In the meantime, I was placed on the transplant list. This would have been June of 2019. But I knew I was pretty far away from getting a transplant, just because of the nature of the process. After 6 months, I was told the procedure had worked. My tumor had been controlled, and at that point, I received exception points on my MELD score, which moved me up the list for liver transplant. Also, around that time, I began experiencing symptoms. I developed a case of hepatic encephalopathy. My wife came home from church one Sunday, and I didn't know who she was, didn't know where I was. And from that point forward, I had brain fog, which is very common for people within the later stages of cirrhosis. So I got these exception points to move up the transplant list in December of 2017. March of 2018, I finally got the call to go in for my transplant. I received the call on a Saturday night, had a transplant on a Sunday, and the operation was a success. The doctor told me after it was over, we didn't get you a Cadillac, but we got you a good Chevy in terms of the quality of the liver. I was also advised at the point by the nursing staff that not to be surprised if I experienced some signs of rejection. Well, none of that happened. I was home 8 days later, and I began my recovery. At that point in time, I really looked back on my experience and just, kind of how this happened to me. Why didn't I know more about my liver? And so there were two things jumped out at me. The first thing was I had 9 years between 2005 and 2014 where I might have dealt with this disease if I had been, if I knew more about it, knew to take the proper steps with nutrition, and also if there had been screening done. There's various techniques for non-invasive testing. If that had been done, I've been more aware of the progression of my disease. The second thing that jumped out at me was just, I knew I didn't know much about my liver, but I discovered that I was the rule, not the exception, and that that people just don't know much about their liver. In fact, I saw a survey that was done around that time that showed that 1/3 of the people surveyed thought you could live without a liver, and it just struck me that my life had been saved by the transplant, and I felt that I had an obligation to make sure other people did not follow in my footsteps because of this lack of awareness. So we formed a nonprofit at that time called NASH Knowledge. This was 6 months after my transplant, and our mission was to increase awareness of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, because while for many people it is a benign disease, it can lead to cirrhosis, as it did in my case, liver cancer. Liver cancer, I discovered and didn't know at the time, is the fastest growing cancer in the United States, and it's among the most deadly of the cancers. So so we set out to make people more aware of liver disease, so they could take the proper steps in their lifestyle, whether it be improve nutrition, losing weight, getting more exercise, and so forth. We also produced a documentary based on my experience and experience of a couple others that was shown on PBS. So we continue to do that. What also jumped out was once COVID hit, that the conditions for more rapid growth of the disease got worse. The weight gain that many people experienced made the population more at risk for developing NASH and then liver cancer. And again, lack of awareness is really the major issue. There's a recent survey that showed that only 6% of the people who have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease know that they have it, and that's why they call this the silent epidemic. It sneaks up on people, and in my case, it went from 0 to 60. I didn't know I had a problem, and all of a sudden, I had a serious problem, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. And the NASH Cure Act, which is being proposed, is something that it can play a major role in raising this awareness. I'm not going to go into any of the details of that act. I think the major thing that it does is it elevates liver health in the discussion of healthcare. There's a lot of talk right now about obesity, about diabetes, but really not much discussion of liver disease. And I think the passage of the NASH Cure Act would really go a long way towards achieving that objective. The more people know about this disease, the more likely it is that they will take steps to prevent it or control it, and that will not only save the lives of people, it will save a lot of money in our healthcare system. So if it's at all possible, I would just strongly recommend that you sign on as a sponsor with the NASH Cure Act. In addition to the NASH Act, we would also look for your support with the Liver Act. That act really addresses this fast-growing epidemic of liver cancer, and there are provisions in there that will increase awareness of liver cancer and serve to motivate people to take action to prevent liver cancer. So we really look for your endorsement of the Liver Act and hope that we can see it enacted.
Hi, my name is Jacki Chen. I'm from Princeton, New Jersey. I was born in Taiwan during the 1960s, and I moved to the United States in 1989. Currently, I'm a faculty member at a New Jersey medical school. In 1998, my elder brother in Taiwan was diagnosed with liver cancer due to chronic hepatitis B. So at that time, I decided to get tested, and I found out that I'm also a Hep B positive patient. When I was first diagnosed, I was scared that will I be like my brother to have liver cirrhosis and liver cancer very soon. So, but at that time, I did not have many symptoms except for elevated liver enzymes and sometimes feeling fatigue. I was also very busy with my research career. There was no good treatment at that time for hepatitis B. The only treatment available was interferon and the first generation antiviral. Interferon had a high tendency of serious side effect, while the first generation antiviral is known to cause drug resistance. However, my brother had no choice but to start antiviral treatment due to his serious liver condition and liver cancer. Later on, when the new antiviral with low drug resistance rate was developed, my brother and many of my family members in Taiwan started the new treatment. So that's at that time, with their encouragement and the fact that I already had severe fibrosis, I actually have to persuade my doctor here in the United States to start my treatment with entecavir in 2008. After starting the antiviral treatment, my Hep B viral load dropped very quickly. Within 3 months, the virus had dropped to undetectable level. My liver enzyme gradually returned to normal, and also I felt less fatigue and was able to work with more energy and to enjoy my free time. With the advancement of new antiviral agent, I'm now taking the newest antiviral tenofovir etofetamide. This drug has a very low instance of drug resistance and a much better safety profile. Currently, my hepatitis virus is undetectable, and my liver enzymes are within normal range. So I'm actually living like a regular normal person. And I'm hoping that this treatment will lower my risk of developing cirrhosis and liver cancer. As we have heard from many experts, Asian Americans are 4 times more likely to have liver cancer than any other ethnic population. Asian Americans comprise 60% of the US population living with hepatitis B, which is the leading risk factor for liver cancer. However, most of us, the Asian American, do not feel comfortable talking about personal hepatitis B infection. There are potential stigma and discrimination that could follow if you are diagnosed. There is also a general lack of awareness about the risk of liver cancer. Unfortunately, this often leads to a diagnosis that may be too late to treat, such as liver cirrhosis or even liver cancer. Liver cirrhosis and liver cancer can be prevented if the hepatitis B virus is eliminated early. Obviously, we need to invest in the development of finding a cure for hepatitis B. However, even though we still don't have a cure for hepatitis B today, current antiviral drugs are safe and effective in suppressing viral replication, as long as you continue to take the drug. It is not an easy decision to come out and talk about personal hepatitis B infection. However, I was so happy to find Hep B Foundation and the many support and very valuable information that they have provided us. At the same time, I've also started to do what I can by sharing my personal story and my knowledge about hepatitis B to other Asian Americans and to people in my home country and beyond. So in closing, hepatitis B is a global pandemic that not many people want to talk about or perhaps cares about. However, there are about 300 million people affected by this deadly disease. It can be easily spread from human to human. compared with the vigorous research and development for therapeutic agents like HIV and hepatitis C, and for the current COVID-19 pandemic, it is clear that hepatitis B has been ignored for too long. We need a cure for hepatitis B, and we need to stop the spread of this deadly virus now. Therefore, finally, I'd like to call on our congressional staff to care about the Liver Act. We should definitely increase funding for Hep B and liver cancer research and invest in raising public awareness, prevention, and early treatment of hepatitis B. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today for this State of Liver Cancer briefing. I really appreciate all of our speakers, Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Chen, Tony Villiotti, and of course, our leader in Congress, Congresswoman Velasquez. We also greatly appreciate the support of our collaborators in patient advocacy, the Hepatitis B Foundation, THICA, and NASH Knowledge. Overall, in closing, as you've heard today, we would greatly appreciate your consideration in support of the Liver Act. In the Senate, it is S3041, and in the House, it is HR 5675. Together, we truly believe we can elevate liver health research and prevention efforts and address this serious, deadly cancer. And we greatly appreciate your time today. Thank you again.